Hello, welcome to my presentation on academic writing and editing, analysis and history of English writing. This is a very broad presentation on a complex topic. We will be discussing basically what makes academic writing complex and some things that, some suggestions for further research. Thank you very much to my mentors Paul Martin and Josh Welsh, as well as the support of the DHC in helping me with this project thus far. Please feel free to email me with any questions that you have. I would be happy to talk. I believe my email will be in Sketch. Anyway, as we go on. So, to begin, the history of academic writing begins. You can trace it back quite a long ways, but the first academic journals date to around the 17th century. Prior to then, correspondence was previously the main way that scientific knowledge was shared in the Western world. This primarily applies to the Western world. Just establishing some limitations here. And this would come to these journals and these conversations between different people who had the time, energy, and money to have what is known as like a scientific education would come to establish the basis for academic language, which as defined here is the oral, written, auditory, and visual language proficiency required to learn effectively in schools and academic programs. And many things in our current university system require academic language today. Think of papers that you write in class, and think of papers that you read in class and different textbooks. This is how we currently primarily transmit information in an academic setting. So then it comes to the question that this presentation is discussing, which is basically what is complexity in academic language? And we'll be using complexity here, referring to specifically the way information is conveyed through language, and also recognizing that this is a very broad topic that can't be, that very much depends on audience. What someone might consider complex or hard to understand is not necessarily what another person considers hard to understand. And it can vary as well in disciplines. So what is considered complex in a chemistry paper is maybe not considered complex in an English paper, or vice versa. And some specific aspects of this can be grammar, and phrasing, like the technical ability someone has to decipher the sentence you have written. The vocabulary, which is like specific words in each topic. So like if you use like a highly specific word, or a word that is only used in one way in one specific discipline, that contributes to some complexity in academic writing, in which you have to have the knowledge previously, before you start reading this piece of writing, that helps you understand what someone means. And this partially ties into this last point, which is assumed knowledge. But also assumed knowledge applies more broadly, such as like, what do you think someone knows already before you start writing a paper? Like, it can be something as simple as like, oh, the concept of gravity. That type of assumed knowledge about your audience is part of what makes academic writing complex. What various authors assume that the reader knows. And additionally, assumed knowledge, and I'll cover this more on the next slide as well, is partially the introduction to this knowledge is usually accomplished through college, or another similar academic institution in which people learn and become the kind of the audience that academic papers are prepared for. And this additionally ties into discipline-specific writing, which, as I mentioned, I was going to get into a little bit more, in which, say, you have a very commonly understood definition, shared knowledge in the discourse community, or knowledge of a specific background in history, such as like if you're writing a history paper, you can generally assume quite a bit of knowledge about history already, and maybe it might provide less context for you as a reader. This also contributes to some complexity in understanding. And so what we've covered so far are kind of unintentional reasons for complexity to exist in writing. And so this is like, these are one way that academic writing is complex when you're writing and you're not aware of the complexity of the and your audience, because you're writing for an audience that already understands some of the complex things that you're talking about. However, there are some additional reasons that academic writing might be complex, such as kind of, I say unintentional here, but it really means unavoidable. Like the knowledge is, the knowledge you are writing about is, say, about a very complicated topic that you cannot write about simply, and sometimes it's just unavoidable that a text is complex. And additionally, some intentional ways that people introduce complexity in academic writing are form, to cause a student or reader to think. So, for example, thinking through the complex logic puzzle that someone has presented to you, or kind of think of it as like a challenge presented by a teacher, where the process of thinking about the topic is part of the lesson that you want your student to understand. And then additionally, Patty Lather discusses one more reason that academic writing, and this applies kind of generally to writing in general, might be complex, is that deliberate non-understanding can challenge commonly held understandings, such as her project in which she which discussed women and AIDS, where she deliberately introduced non-understanding into her text as a work to resist a culture that calls for everything to be digestible and understandable. This is less relevant for academic texts whose primary objective is to convey understandable information to an audience, but it does exist and I do wanted to mention it. And this is just kind of, I wanted to show an example of some of the confusions that can pop up regarding academic language, which are especially felt by students who have non-traditional academic backgrounds or who are, say, English language learners. So we'll take this example sentence from the Formation of the Foundation of Academic Writing by Ismagulova in 2016, which says, in the conditions of the deepening of integration processes into the world educational space, the urgent need of a modern specialist becomes a language competence, the readiness for academic activity and scientific and research work, and further professional activity related to information processing and integration into the global academic and professional paradigm. So this is not only a very long sentence, but it's also slightly confusing. I've kind of chopped this sentence into bits and then reworded it down below at how I understand it, but there are some places where you can kind of see how a text might be confusing, or a student might not understand, such as like unclear phrases, deepening of integration processes. What kind of processes? What, a modern specialist in what? Like the global academic and professional paradigm, what does that mean actually for this text? And so this has been rephrased as as higher education around the world becomes more connected, scholars are now required to have a variety of skills, including language competence, readiness for academic research, and the ability to process information related to global academic standards, which is slightly more clear, but still has some confusion surrounding it. So this connects us back to current research being done, which emphasizes students learning writing, as well as this being a product of writing being a product of critical thinking, which kind of blends the two ideas of when you write, you understand, and when you understand, you write. Kind of proposes that writing be part of the discovery process. Additionally, English for academic purposes has gained popularity as a way for schools and universities to prepare students for academic writing, but we can consider how not only we can prepare individuals to learn more about academic writing, but also how we can prepare academic writing to be more clear overall and not have those sentences like the one we showed before. And this can be done as a suggestion through future research into the editing practices of students, professors, and journals who often do not have, who sometimes do not have editing standards that promote clarity. Thank you very much for your time, and this is some of my works cited.